Welcome to Cross-Pollinations, the Canadian Association for Health Humanities Virtual Round Series. We thank you all for tuning into this wherever and whenever you are tuning into it. We're very excited to bring you this special recorded December iteration of the Round Series featuring Leanne Dunic, Fiona Tinwei Lam, and Armand Garnet Ruffo. And I'm just going to do a very quick introduction here to the series. The series is sponsored by the League of Canadian Poets. I'm here, Nick Brewer, I'm here as a representative of them, as well as the Canadian Association for Health Humanities and the Health Arts Research Centre. And I'm thrilled to introduce Leanne Dunic, who is a biracial, bisexual woman who has spent her life navigating liminal spaces, inspiring her to produce transmedia projects such as To Love the Coming End, with Book Hug and Chin Music Press in 2017, and The Gift, Book Hug 2019. She is the fiction editor at Tahoma Literary Review and the leader of the band The Deep Cove. Her newest book is a lyric memoir with music entitled One and a Half of You, Talon Books 2021. She lives on the unceded and occupied traditional territories of the, I didn't do my homework.
That's okay. It's the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples.
Thank you very much. And over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Nick. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm coming to you right now from the lands of the Gabrielino and Tongva people, also known as Pasadena. I'm really happy to be here in this discussion and sharing a poetry today. I thought, given the themes of healing and health, I would read a selection of poems from my two books, my two full-length collections that touch on the intersectionality of mental health, physical health, emotional health, spiritual health. So I'm going to start with a poem from my first book, which is To Love the Coming End. In this book, the narrator is dealing with their experience of grief, and it parallels some geographic and historical traumas that are happening around the Pacific Rim. Respiration is forgetful. Circulation refuses my hands. Pain in my skull is equatorial. Wake with vessels broken in my ear. No cocaine, but heart palpitations. Jaw is fixed. Walk, toes curled. Denude cells like a mountainside. Skin bursts freckles worth watching. Strands of bitter brown turn to bone filaments. The cinch of a muscle bends me in half. Shoulder is electric. Eardrums resound frequencies. Ribs restrict the ability to sing. Memories become dreams, and dreams are where I peel dry sections of lip. Sleep leaves imprints of fingers round my neck. Looking behind is a physical impossibility, while my tail still twitches in your hand. Dentist. Do you wear your mouth guard every night? Doctor. These ailments, stress. Chiropractor. Torsion, tension, relax. Massage therapist. You need a counselor, not an RMT. Counselor. Not stressed, sad. Heart. The work is too much. Now that passage, while this book is a work of fiction, that passage was definitely connected to my personal experience of dealing with health issues and ongoing process of healing with my health practitioners. And I find that for my writing practice and artistic practice in general, my health practitioners actually play a really big role in my processing of whatever I'm experiencing. So if it's a physical ailment, obviously they are there to help with physical situation, but also I have really great practitioners that I've been seeing for many years, and they often go beyond, you know, the symptom and try to find what the cause is, the root cause. And so I am super grateful for all the practitioners in my life and how they try to help my healing from a holistic way. And especially my counselor. My counselor has been a key supporter of my creative work, in the sense that she has helped me over the last 7 years process, of course, all the things that I'm going through, but also anticipate consequences of my work. In particular, my latest book, which is a memoir, writing intimately about people who are close to me and putting that out to the world. It took me many years. I think it was about 5 years of discussing with my counselor, like, how do I put this work out into the world? How do I deal with the possible consequences and falling outs that could happen from writing about family members or other loved ones? And I really valued having that support and a person outside of my actual life to give me some perspective of how I can manage putting out such vulnerable work. And I'm so grateful to her. But I'll go back to reading from To Love the Coming End. These next poems have to do with convalescence. On top of sweaty sheets, I exist without basic order. Order of eating, of hydration, of relieving myself of concentrated urine. Buddha says, existence is suffering, desire is suffering. To be awake with one's anxieties is suffering. If I can sleep, then I can survive. But there's something I desire, something that in my rest-deprived state seems attainable. Reunion, perhaps through dreams, but then there would have to be sleep, without worry, without unnamed guilt. Reality is unreality. I have no references to validate my existence. Mornings and nights, I pray to other gods, talk to you, think of new superstitions. This poem takes place at a reflexologist's office. If I gave this man my spine, he'd grunt while forcing shoulders back, mumble that I sit too much, unaware of where I've been, where I'm trying to go. Instead, he knuckles tendons, tender arches. Soul maps disclose memories, habits, nerves distended from fissures within. Stimulate crystal-pointed organs, glands, a vast unnerving. Reflex I contain. Yes, I'm deceptive in voluntary restraint. Hand shields eyes as if it could quell throbs. Air-conditioned chills, heat swells, cold riddles. Mahjong tiles click from the room beside. Whine of ache drowns the chirp of Mandarin in casual gambling. He shouts number into his phone, declares, I'm rubbing the fortune god's leg. Misses his luck by 1 digit. Where there is nothing, there is everything. White ointment draws greasy circles on calves. Must be healthy, didn't flinch. It's possible that a love's sole purpose is to be unrequited, to build a pressure without release until we find an act that allows for it to escape, to seep or burst from us. There are the common ones: booze, drugs, travel, academia, sex. I've tried them all. Certainly, none are enough to make up for the fissure inside. Only an attempt to find a new way to breathe, to place yourself in the world of without. I'll leave it there for this book. Now I'm going to read from my latest book, 1.5 of You, which, as I mentioned before, is a memoir. It's a poetic memoir. It has to do a lot with my experience of being biracial in a predominantly white community, also bisexual, so navigating these liminal spaces. And also it starts from when I'm growing up to being an adult now and searching for completion or belonging when I've often felt like just part of something, but not ever really something. And so in my life and in this book, I had a time where I met another person who was half Chinese and half white, and had a romantic relationship with them. And having that connection was an invigorating experience, but then losing it was quite traumatic for me. So I thought I would read some poems that deal with that part of my life experience. I split us into countries. One thinks, the other lets the heart fester. One with hair reaching like black tentacles, the other with no hair at all. We've broken into lissom parts. Phantom limbs cannot touch bodies. How hard to let go of sameness. Demi, hemi, semi. Language between, we understand. Customs, our own dialect, letters chosen for the shadows cast, shapes, ways that can be misheard. Separate, our tongues fade, our hyphened world. I dream of amputation, my lover's arm. My missing doesn't thin. Still I mill stones between molars, undamming what we built. If I sound desperate, I am. Silt accretes. This is not failing. Anything can be trapped. Sedimentary, layer upon layer, whole but not perfect. Animals will die. Salt and sentiments collect in the cracks. Now we are bays. I dream of finding you, and my mouth opens to pour jagged rocks. I find for myself that connecting with nature is a really important part of grounding myself and being in the present moment. And it took another person to kind of point that out to me. Someone who reviewed this book pointed all the nature references and the sensory experiential moments in nature that were part of the healing, and also trying part of my childhood, trying to make sense of the world. So thanks to that reviewer for helping me understand myself a little bit more. Yeah, I think it's really important to be able to have access to the natural world. And so I feel so lucky I live where I live, and there's so much to experience, so much beauty to experience. I think I will just read one more poem. And this is taking place in natural hot springs in Japan. Bathing in the onsen, I notice my welts, bruises, allergic reactions, freckles gone wrong. Cuts I thought healed, open with the heat. A decade of distance becomes bearable until it isn't. Everything is minerals. This water rooted from Yugawara up 7 floors for us to soak for our health with our breasts facing the sea. I'm unable to write a word without you in my ink. You, a part of me, apart from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leanne. That was absolutely wonderful. I feel just so lucky to have been able to, and kind of one-on-one experience that a little bit too. Oh, that was so beautiful. And I'm so excited for viewers to witness that as well. Fiona, I'm gonna go ahead and bring you in now. Going to add a spotlight, have both of you here for a moment. Vancouver's 6th Poet Laureate, Fiona Tinwei Lam, has published 3 collections of poetry and a children's book. Her poems have been featured in Best Canadian Poetry, the League of Canadian Poets Poetry Pause, and Poem in Your Pocket programs, and thrice with BC's Poetry in Transit, as well as in award-winning poetry videos that she has produced that have screened worldwide. She's been shortlisted for the City of Vancouver Book Prize and other awards, and her work has been included in over 40 anthologies. Thank you so much for joining us today, Fiona, and I am so excited for your reading, so I'm going to let you dive right in.
Great, thanks so much, Nicole. I'm coming from the territory, unceded traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, also known as Vancouver, BC. So I'm going to read a selection of poems following Leanne's beautiful, beautiful poems, also a selection from a number of my past books. And I thought what I would do so that you could follow along is to share my screen with a PowerPoint with some of the poems there, because some of the shapes of the poems add to the meaning. So I'm going to read a number of poems today. My parents were both physicians, and I am not a physician, and I was never a physician, but I had the experience of what physicians' lives were like. So I'll dive right in with my first poem, which is in the next slide. So this poem is Family Doctor, and it's in my book, Enter the Chrysanthemum. And my mom was a single mother because she was widowed at quite a young age. My dad died when he was 42. I was 11, my sister was 8, and my brother was 3. And we had to help our mother as best we could, which wasn't very well given our age and stage in life, but we tried. So this is about the stresses that physicians experience that we often forget about if we're outside of the practice of medicine. But from the inside, we experience that stress firsthand. Family Doctor. Our mother would gripe, "I need a wife," as she'd trudge through the door, shoulders bowed, eyes grim from a day's load of patients, babies, bills. Silence clamped down on our after-school voices. We'd gauge her face for bad weather, minute shifts in the terrain of muscle around mouth and eyes. We'd tuck away consent forms, invitations, and hunker down. Through supper, the quiet would fill, swallow by swallow. A few times she'd take us out on house calls, her Corolla inching up dim side streets on the hunt for some feverish kid. Each of us would peer past bushes, unlit porches for house numbers, sailors navigating passage through fog. Past midnight, the phone would jangle our dreams. She'd leave to nap at the hospital, burrowed beneath her coat, awaiting a pre-dawn birth. All next day, her blood ran brown from cheap coffee downed between patients, bitter edges blunted by tilts of sugar, pyramids of cream. Other nights, sink jammed, fridge gaping, she'd marshal us out to eat. We'd go wherever we'd go, sit wordlessly and watch our mother crumple, lay her head gently on the table, close her eyes, fall through the world. So it's not easy being a doctor, and in those days she did it all. She did locums and she did house calls. She was returning to practice after not being allowed to practice by my dad for 8 years, and it was very hard climbing back into the profession, and especially being a mother of 3 kids. So it was not an easy time. My next poem is Examination, and it's from a patient's point of view. And this is based on an experience I had in the hospital, feeling really, really quite alone. Examination. You are splayed like a specimen under fluorescent lights, the doctor's fingers rummaging in your body as if it were a broken toaster. You talk about who hurt you to this white-coated confidant, his metal tools aligned on a metal tray, his hands glowing, opaquely unreal in plastic gloves, his glances of polite concern. You hear waves of footsteps, rattling stretchers and carts wheeled on endless linoleum, doctors being paged, someone crying down a labyrinth of corridors, all sounds swabbed and wrapped in gauze. An intern watches your unraveling, his thoughts damned against a smirk. You feel your vulva turning into pussy. The fingers snag a nerve. Your eyes shut. You know theirs stay open. So that's a poem about lack of empathy. And although they say there are no nerves down there, I have nerves down there. And I'm sure many other people and other women have nerves in that part of the body. So the next poem is, again, revisiting my mother at the other stage of her life. She had early onset Alzheimer's, and it was unnerving for her to lose her cognitive abilities. And I went with her to the neurologist's office for a confirmed diagnosis. Although we didn't really need one at that point, we kind of knew things were going awry. But this was the clearest time when the switch in rules was very, very clear. Maternal archaeology. In the neurologist's examining room, I help my mother undress. Like a punished child, she sits hunched on the high table while I lift off each layer gently. Blue jacket bought on sale at Zeller's, woolen vest grandma sent one Christmas, my checked blouse from high school, one of dad's frayed undershirts. Then the flesh withered and soft as an old quilt, fine skin loose around a body becoming unfamiliar to itself. I drape the paper robe out between us like a curtain. Docile, her arms slide into the sleeves. I tie the back and stand away to see if everything's right. She points to what's on her foot, the word for sock, gone missing. So in the next poem, you'll see that I wrote a number of poems about this experience of my mother's dementia. It was quite harrowing. And those early stages when she knew that she was losing her mind, her abilities, there was so much panic. And this poem is about that experience. Call. These days, every hour or less, a phone call from my mother. She flails and clutches at me through the line. Help me. But I can't drag her out. I say, it's all right. It's all right. But it's not. And I can't stop the dark as it pushes her in. What's left of her memory, a skim of debris that disintegrates as she flounders. Words have no arms. I love you saves no one. And soon I'll cry too, from what's gouged away beneath the soothe and the lull of my voice. I'll coax out a blanket of sleep and tuck it around her, make her forget the forgetting, until the numbers too begin drifting, just out of grasp, just like the daughter I will no longer be. And she did forget who I was in terms of my name, and other times I really felt she didn't recognize me. This next poem, Leanne touched upon this in her reading, is about how important it is to connect with nature, even if it's diluted nature or being on the street, but getting outside, feeling the air, seeing the trees, having all that sensory stimulation of being in the world. Walking. My mother won't look at me or speak. Her face is as clenched as her fists pounding the table for breakfast. Her cardigan's splotched from the meal, her hair greasy. She won't let them steal the clothes off her back, let alone drown her. She knows what those sweet-voiced bullies are after. And who am I anyway? I press the elevator code. We descend from the 3rd floor back down to earth, then out into late August sunshine, world made true by light. We make our slow escape from the garden, turn the corner. A minute later, a smile starts to bloom. Her face radiant with sun, she shuffle trots down the sidewalk. A hand pats a bush, gestures up at a fir. You see, she mumbles with what's left of a jigsaw of words. We reach Oak Street, where there are no oaks, only traffic blasting up and down a city spine. Her eyes widen. A bus surges past. Whee! She cries. Hand in my hand by this roaring, clattering river, my mother looks at me at last and shouts, You see? You see? So there was that moment of joy, just escaping the facility that she was in, which was fairly sterile, pleasant, but sterile. And this poem is set in that place that she was in. It had plenty of prints of various artwork around and plants and so forth. But it was hard to bring life and stimulation there. And sometimes I would bring my son when he was a toddler over, but sometimes it was a bit scary when I did. Nursing home. My son runs to hug her. She doesn't know his name. Asks about my other children, ones I've never had. When she tries to grab his arm, he prances past dazed residents, arranged like potted plants around a yammering TV. He scampers through the corridors, turns the corner. She wonders if he's been kidnapped. But in her room, they each take a harmonica and commence a conversation of blasted notes and chords, loud and louder with each turn. He laughs in the dissonance the walls collapse before they rise again. So it's those little moments of connection that you live for in these situations, and you just have to wait for them, and they do come if you try. Everyone's had all kinds of medical experiences personally and with family. My partner had colorectal cancer. My dad had died of liver cancer. Many experiences of being in the hospital and seeing what happens and empathizing, although of course the person who is actually the patient is the one who's experiencing it most completely and most viscerally. And in this case, this poem is about a visceral experience of my partner's colorectal surgery and time in the hospital recovering. And I decided to structure it on the color spectrum. And so there are sections for each color in the color spectrum, although not in the right order. So the poem spectrum is in my collection Odes and Laments. And it starts with the definition, the etymology of the word guts. It's derived from the Old English word gutus for bowels or entrails. A slideshow through his intestinal tunnel. First, polyps like crimson scrawls. Next, a fleshy pimple. Last one, a red jelly frog packed with maggots, blocking passage. Cancer from the inside. Buckle our seats for the ride down the oncological flowchart, biopsy reports, staging, scans, referrals. One box leads to another box. Unseen, death. Follow the red line that weaves through the hospital like a vein. Violet. Purple folder on the kitchen counter by the phone. Appointments, surgeon, specialist, CT, ultrasound, pre-admission clinic. Brochures, booklets, checklists, test results, instructions, requisitions, prescriptions. Compass and hub through summer and fall. Blue. Gut surgery, the diagram for resection. Plumbing repair crossed with tailoring. Shaved, swabbed, intubated for visceral realignment. Gut instincts, spill one's guts, bust a gut. 4 hours later, neat lines of staples, plastic tubes to plastic sacks. One tube connecting to a blue PCA that ticks and clucks as if tiny robot chickens inside titrate hydromorphone day and night. Right in the gut, takes guts, gutsy. Excisions hidden, rejigged. Will the body miss its missing pieces? Gut reaction, gut wrenching, gutted. Orange. First day, little plastic juice cups, orange, apple, grape. Jello, orange, yellow, red. Dishwater broths. Second day, cream soups, carrot, broccoli, mushroom. Desserts, orange sherbet, vanilla ice cream, puddings. Third day, rice with green beans, fish, chicken sandwich. Then squirm, ache, bloat. Twins, I ask? He doesn't laugh. Towers of juice, abandoned meals. Ballooning traffic jam. All horns blare. This is my favorite one. Green. Bizarre factory. Snaking coils of tubing suction out internal royal of emerald seas. Inert rows of patients producing from stomach through nose to plastic canisters hooked on the wall. Filled, emptied, filled, emptied, filled, emptied. Avoid green smoothies for years. And the final one, yellow. Push button for shot of hydromorphone from PCA. Pull on rubber-soled hospital socks. Pull on an extra hospital robe to cover backside. Disconnect NG tube. Clip hemovac to gown. Unplug 2 electrical cords from wall. Drape cords on IV pole. Grip pole. Pull up to standing. Step by step. Past doors of the ward. A window. Pause. English Bay glitters beyond rooftops. Random choreographies below. Traffics wax and wane. Jaywalkers. Window shoppers. Grip, pull, push, return. Stronger. Walk through the ward. Enter elevator. Arrive. Walk past glass doors. Outside. First time in 3 weeks. Afternoon warm gold on skin. Breeze. Tears. Must be the medication. Tubes one by one disconnected. First shower in 4 weeks. Fill out forms, questionnaires. Brief on diet, pain meds. Dress in street clothes. Jeans, loose. T-shirt, loose. Discard wilted flowers. Give hydrangea plant to staff. Return magazines. Good luck from the nurse who changed dressings, gave injections, adjusted the IV all month with his artificial arm and hand. How many patients pass through? How many die? Every bodily fluid, every kind of human being. Down elevator to parkade, then out, late August sunlight. Hospital behind, block after block, almost home, free. So those are the poems from my books, Intimate Distances, Enter the Chrysanthemum, and also my last one, Odes and Laments. But I also edited a collection, Bright Well, Canadian contemporary poems about facing cancer with a number of authors from Lorna Crozier, Maureen Hines, Michael Harris, Susan Down, Anne Simpson, Richard Summer, Sue Wheeler, Betsy Warland, Lois Lorimer, a number of wonderful Canadian poets who've had cancer and have written about it. Some of who survived and some of whom didn't. But it's still available and provides a firsthand experience of something that has touched so many of us, whether personally or through family members or friends. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona. That was, I don't want to use a good word to describe it because it was heavy and it was intimate, but it was also just so vulnerable. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Ani Buju, hello. Ninga ga guechitum Anishinaabe Moyan. Armand Garnet Ruffo and Dejnakas Jaganashimo. Gishikueke Ituko Anishinaabe Mam. Chaplo, Fox Lake in Dunjiba, Kingston Inda, Queen's University in Danoke. I've been asked to read a couple of poems and connect them to health from an Indigenous perspective. So I'd like to start with my first book, Opening in the Sky. And the poem I'd like to read is called Sakweshik, and Opening in the Sky is actually a translation of the name Sakweshik, and that was my great-great-grandfather's name. Although I never knew him, I am told that my great-great-grandfather signed away miles of home and bush. Campfires hugged Lake Bisco tastings like moons. In treaty with the government of Canada, official men in official black suits. It is a special day, he pronounced, looking stern and proud, in this photograph shot in front of the Hudson's Bay Company's store, while faces in the background, looking bewildered, looked on. And he knew the momentous day meant change. Change, yes, like the seasons, he knew that. And standing like the trunk of a tree, dressed in leather and balancing his rifle, I am told, he said slowly in grave concern, looking beyond the heads of all, to me now squarely, some will learn and speak. The next poem I'd like to read from the same book is called Old Story. The story she tells spirals out of a time before your birth, before even hers, an old story that sounds new, that rises like the steam from both your cups, yet has nothing to do with cracked cups, unmatched plates, half bottles of rye, National Enquirer in the outhouse, flies sneaking in through holes in the screen, lumber picked up along the roadside, banged together, beer bottles and ashtrays full of butts. Nothing to do with that, the thing that rises like night, like water from deep in remembered earth, out of forgotten memory. The thing that sounds like coming rain and makes eyes blink round when wind creaks through houses and old timber tells of an older life. A path bordered by jack pine and birch leading down to Mishu Pishu of the lake. Emerald eyes and skin of gold scales, a path to red snake, black pike, and family. Come under the star blanket, a splinter of moon, her voice guides your footsteps along islands of solid earth. Where are you going? She says, to the dream, where else? To the part that must be found out, where one day you can return on your own. Does she actually say this, or are you now dreaming? And almost as soon as she begins, you are back in the kitchen, your hand gripped to a cold cup of tea, the clock hitting supper time. So the next poem I'd like to read is from a book called The Thunderbird Poems, and it was a book of ephrasis poetry based on the paintings of Norval Morrisseau, the great Anishinaabe painter. And I'd like to read the last poem, and it there's a little description, and it says at the beginning of each poem, and it says this work is painted on a piece of stone and executed in red paint, reminiscent of the red ochre of the original Anishinaabe pictographs or rock paintings, one of the earliest sources of inspiration for the artist. Marvelous in its simplicity, it speaks of continuance and the power of the imagination to inspire. So Indian canoe, no date. Behind the blink of a dream, the shaman paints himself into voyage and travels with the people who have been paddling all their lives for centuries back to the source of religion. Mishu Pichu Watamanitu spirit guide swims the underworld, spiraling out of a whirlpool. Sign of medicine, power, and presence, a prayer for calm water. Loon shapes the canoe in an elegant song of loyalty and beauty, head held high to the distant horizon, vigilant for the people. Sturgeon supports the fragile vessel, master of deep water. Strength and sweet flesh given in self-sacrifice, beloved totems. And the four aboard, man, woman, child, shaman, paddle or paintbrush in hand. Painted in red ochre on stone and bound together, transformed innumerable times by innumerable artists so that the people might continue. And then I'll read a couple poems now from my last book, Treaty Number. And I'll start with Raising a Boy. Teach him he is beginning. Teach him to put his hand on his chest. Teach him to take this thing he feels for his mother. Teach him his mother is the earth. Teach him to take it in his hand. Teach him to blow on it and give it breath. Teach him he is beginning. Teach him it is the Creator's breath. Teach him he's just made the world. Teach him to watch it closely as it floats above him. Teach him it took to look at all the rivers and lakes and mountains. Teach him the world can be anything. Teach him he is beginning. Teach him to imagine it on fire. Teach him to be careful not to burn himself. Teach him many people live lives of fire. Teach him they are not happy people. Teach him they break things. Teach him he is beginning. Teach him his job is to fix things. Teach him they don't know any better. Teach him his job is to know better. Teach him once there was a great flood. Teach him it is the same flood in every culture. Teach him he is beginning. Teach him once the fire went out. Teach him the water brought beginning. Teach him the people lived in peace. Teach him he is water. Teach him to be happy. Teach him he is beginning. The next poem is Jahwed Gilwin. Today I learned the word for kindness, a difficult word to pronounce. It sounds like tumbling water, something to float on the more you think about it, study it, parse it, realize its many meanings. One is a way of being. I take this to mean a way of living. Another meaning signals inclusion, implying generosity. And I wondered about that too. I thought it as an innate gift to be shared, a human patrimony. For this reason, this led me home, which leads me to ask, where is home? Is it at the place we live, the place we come from, the place we die? Where would I go to find it? I searched a riverbank, and ended up standing beside the Kebesquashishing, a boy running away, running back. The answer, drip, drip, dripped inside me, coursed through me. What it tells me is that not to find it, feel it in all its manifestations, is to be lost, stingy, greedy. And so the last piece I'll read is called A Wise Man Once Told Me, for Wilfred Pelche. When the knock comes to your door, you will not be there to answer it. We have been undressing too long. It is time to put our clothes back on. You take the water that is still, the water that flows, and all the things in the water. Bring them back within you where they belong. You take the land and the trees and all the animals and the insects who live in those trees. You bring that all back to inside you, of you. Then you take the birds, the air, the clouds, the stars, the sky, and the whole universe. That too belongs inside of you. And then you take all the people of the world and every language in the world and bring that back to inside of you where it rightfully belongs. When you have done that, you will be fully clothed, and each foot will know exactly where to fall, and you cannot make a mistake. When the knock comes to your door, you will be there to answer it. So to connect these poems to health and healing, I have to go back to the colonialism, the beginning. And when the colonists arrived and colonized Turtle Island, the first thing they did, of course, was to marginalize and disempower Indigenous peoples. And how they did that was through a number of mechanisms. And one of the mechanisms, of course, was stereotyping. Stereotyping served a purpose for the colonizer, and that purpose was to disempower and to essentially shame Indigenous people by making them feel that their cultures and their ways of knowing, their sense of being as a whole, Anishinaabe, was worthless. And this happened to Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island, and in some regard, it still happens today. So one of the mechanisms, of course, as I said, was shame. So Indigenous people then felt denigrated and felt we had no place in the country. And so, having grown up in the 60s and 70s, in that period of time, I experienced this firsthand. And so when I started to write, one of the things I wanted to do then was provide a counter narrative to that. And Sakwejik, of course, talking about the treaties, Old Story, talking about some of our spirituality, our stories, our mythologies. The same when I tackled the work of Norval Morrisseau. My goal there again was to extrapolate and really look at his work and bring it to life through words. And so when I looked at his the last painting, Indian Canoe, I was trying then to again show that other artists, since Indigenous artists since time immemorial were bringing and giving legitimacy and to Indigenous ways of being, providing that recognition, if you like. So and then when part of it then was pulling the past into the present and looking towards the future, and a poem again like Raising a Boy, and talks about the future generation. And whereas a wise man once told me, talks about that embedded knowledge that we have, that epistemology which is about nature, being part of the world. So I again my work then is I see it as counteracting those stereotypes, providing Indigenous peoples with a space for themselves that reflects the wealth of the culture, and also works to counteract again the dominant stereotypes and forces of colonialism. Thank you very much for listening. Chimagwich.